I held that note for 11 days before I circled anything. 11 days. A 6-year-old asked me the most honest question anyone had ever asked me in my entire life, and I couldn't answer it right away. Not because I didn't know what I wanted, but because I was terrified I'd say yes, and then prove, eventually, the same way my own father had proved it to me, that yes doesn't always hold. This is the story of how a folded piece of notebook paper with 2 boxes on it, one that said yes, one that said no, ended up being the hardest decision I ever had to make, and the best one. I met Claire on a Tuesday night at a laundromat, which is not where I expected to meet the person who'd changed my entire life, but that's how it happened, so I'm not going to dress it up as something more romantic than it was. My apartment building's laundry room had been broken for 3 weeks. The landlord kept promising a repair guy who never showed, so I'd started hauling my clothes 4 blocks over to a 24-hour laundromat with flickering fluorescent lights and a vending machine that only sold 2 things: stale pretzels and orange soda. It was not a glamorous chapter of my life. I noticed Claire before I noticed her daughter. She was sitting on a plastic chair, scrolling through her phone, with the specific exhaustion of someone who'd had a long day and still had several hours left in it. It was only when a small voice piped up from the row of washing machines, "Mommy, this one's making a weird noise," that I realized she wasn't alone. The little girl was maybe 6, dark curly hair and 2 uneven pigtails, standing on her tiptoes trying to peer into a washing machine that was in fact making an alarming noise. "Lily, step back from there, baby," Claire said, already halfway out of her chair. I don't know what made me get up too, probably just instinct, the kind that kicks in when you see a rattling machine and a kid standing too close to it. But I walked over and glanced at the display panel. "It's just unbalanced," I said. "Happens when the load's uneven. If you open it and shift the clothes around, it'll stop." Claire looked at me, surprised, and then relieved. "Oh, thank you." I was 2 seconds from assuming it was about to explode. "To be fair, it did sound like it was about to explode," I said. Lily, unbothered by any of this, looked up at me with the kind of direct, unfiltered curiosity only kids have. "Are you a laundry doctor?" I laughed before I could stop myself. "Something like that." Claire smiled, a tired smile, but a real one, and introduced herself, and Lily, and somehow the next 40 minutes turned into an actual conversation, while our clothes tumbled through their cycles. She told me she was a single mom, that her ex had left when Lily was 2, that she worked as a dental hygienist during the day and picked up shifts at a diner some weekends to cover the gap her ex's inconsistent child support left behind. She said all of this matter-of-factly, without any bid for sympathy, the way you talk about weather or traffic, just facts of a life she'd built without much room to feel sorry for herself about it. I told her about my own stuff. Nothing as heavy, just the broken laundry room, my job, the fact that I'd been single for a while and had mostly made peace with it. Lily interrupted us periodically to report updates on her stuffed rabbit's opinion of the vending machine's pretzel selection, which Claire apologized for and I insisted I didn't mind at all, because I genuinely didn't. Before we packed up our laundry that night, Claire said, half joking, "Well, if the machines ever break again, I know who to call. The laundry doctor." "Anytime," I said, and meant it more than the joke really called for. I didn't think much would come of it. A nice conversation at a laundromat, the kind of thing that happens once and never repeats. I had no idea I'd be back there, on purpose, the following Tuesday, hoping to see them again. I want to be honest about something, because I think it's the part that gets skipped in stories like this. What happened over the next several months wasn't a whirlwind. It was slow, ordinary, built out of small repeated choices, the way real things usually are. I did go back to that laundromat the next Tuesday, and the one after that. Claire and Lily were there most weeks, same time, same routine, and eventually it stopped being a coincidence and started being something we both quietly arranged without saying so out loud. We'd sit on those plastic chairs, swap stories about our weeks, and Lily would narrate an ongoing saga involving her stuffed rabbit, a sock that had gone permanently missing 3 months earlier, and a kindergarten classmate named Dylan she had extremely strong opinions about. About 6 weeks in, Claire asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime. Not laundromat dinner, actual dinner, without Lily, and I said yes so fast I probably should have been embarrassed about it. That first real date was ordinary in all the best ways. We talked for 3 hours at a diner that wasn't even particularly good, and somewhere in there she told me more about Lily's father, how he'd shown up sporadically for the first year after leaving, promising things he never followed through on, until eventually the promises stopped altogether. She told me Lily didn't really remember him anymore, just an idea of him, a shape where a person used to be. I've dated a little since then, Claire told me that night. Not much. It's complicated when you've got a kid. Every guy who seems nice eventually hits the point where meeting Lily becomes a whole thing, and either they're weirdly overeager about it, trying too hard to prove something, or they get quiet and start pulling back. Like the kid's a complication they didn't sign up for. I've gotten pretty good at spotting both types early. Which one am I? I asked. She considered the question seriously. Neither, so far. You just talk to her, like she's a person, not a test you're trying to pass, or a problem you're managing. It's actually kind of rare. I met Lily properly, outside the laundromat context, about 2 months into dating Claire. We went to the park on a Saturday, and I brought a kite because Claire had mentioned Lily had never flown one, and I spent an embarrassing amount of that afternoon failing to get it airborne, while Lily narrated my failure with the blunt honesty only a 6-year-old can manage. You're bad at this, she informed me, not unkindly, just factually. I'm aware, I said. My dad was bad at things too, she said, and then, just as quickly, moved on to asking if we could get ice cream, the way kids do, dropping something enormous into a conversation, and then walking straight past it without noticing the weight of what they'd just said. I looked at Claire. She'd heard it too. Something passed between us. Not panic exactly, but a kind of quiet acknowledgement that this wasn't just two adults dating anymore. There was a small person in the middle of it, forming impressions, building comparisons, whether either of us meant for her to or not. That night, after Lily fell asleep in the car on the drive home, Claire and I sat outside her apartment for a while before I left, engine off, both of us quiet. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer, not a nice one, Claire said. Are you in this because you actually want this? The whole picture, the kid, the mess, the school pickups and the tantrums and the eventual teenage years I'm already dreading. Or are you in this because you like me and the rest is just something you're tolerating for now? That's a fair question, I said. I've been asking myself something similar, actually, and I think the honest answer is that somewhere around the kite, watching her call me bad at something with zero hesitation, I stopped thinking of her as part of a package deal and started thinking of her as someone I actually wanted to know. I'm not going to pretend I have this all figured out, but it's not tolerance. It's not even close to that. Claire didn't say anything right away. She just reached over and squeezed my hand once, firmly, and said, "Okay." I needed to hear that plainly, not implied. It became a kind of pattern between us after that. She'd ask the direct, uncomfortable question, and I'd learn, slowly, to answer it directly instead of retreating into something vaguer and safer. I think that's part of why, months later, I was even capable of sitting with a piece of notebook paper for 11 days, instead of just circling something quickly to avoid an uncomfortable feeling. She'd taught me, without meaning to frame it that way, that the honest answer was always worth more than the fast one. Over the following months, I became a regular fixture in Lily's life, without either Claire or I formally deciding that's what would happen. I picked Lily up from school sometimes, when Claire's shift ran long. I sat through an entire kindergarten talent show, where Lily performed a somewhat chaotic interpretive dance to a song about a taco. I got good at braiding hair, badly, after watching approximately 11 tutorial videos. Around the 8-month mark, Lily started asking questions that Claire and I weren't fully prepared for. "Are you going to marry my mommy?" she asked one evening, completely out of nowhere, while I was helping her with a puzzle at the kitchen table. "That's a question for grown-ups to figure out together," I said, which felt like a reasonable, careful non-answer at the time. "That's not an answer," she said, unimpressed, which, fair. Claire and I talked about it that night after Lily went to bed. "She's going to keep asking," Claire said. "She's 6, not stupid. She sees you here 3, 4 nights a week. She sees how you are with her. She's trying to understand what that means, because the last time a man was this consistent in her life, he eventually just wasn't." "What do you want me to say to her?" I asked. "I don't know yet," Claire admitted. "I think I want you to figure out what's true first, and then we'll figure out how to say it to her together." That conversation sat with me for weeks. Because here's the thing I hadn't told Claire yet, not fully. My own father left when I was 7. Not dramatically, no big blow-up. He just slowly stopped showing up. The visits got further apart, then stopped altogether, and eventually a phone number changed and there wasn't even a way to reach him anymore. I grew up watching my mother do everything alone, and I grew up with a very specific, very quiet fear that I never talked about with anyone. That whatever had made my father capable of just disappearing was maybe in me too. Some dormant capacity for walking away that I hadn't been tested on yet, because I'd never had anything worth staying for until now. I hadn't planned on telling Claire any of that so directly, but about 10 months into dating her, on a night Lily was staying at her grandmother's, I finally did. "I need you to know something," I said, "about why I've been careful with Lily's questions. It's not because I don't know how I feel. It's because I'm scared of becoming a person I've spent my whole life terrified of being." I told her everything: my father, the slow fade, the phone number that stopped working, the years of watching my mom do it all alone, and telling myself I'd never do that to anyone, while also quietly worrying that maybe it wasn't a choice. Maybe it was just something broken and inherited that would surface eventually, no matter how much I didn't want it to. Claire listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she reached over and took my hand. "Thank you for telling me that," she said. "I want to say something, and I need you to actually hear it, not just nod along. Being scared of becoming your father is not the same thing as being your father. The fact that you're this careful, this thoughtful, this afraid of getting it wrong, that's not evidence you're going to leave. That's evidence you understand exactly what's at stake if you do, which is more self-awareness than he ever had." "I want to believe that," I said. "You don't have to believe it all at once," she said. "You just have to keep showing up while you're figuring it out. That's the actual test. Not whether you're scared, whether you show up anyway." About 3 weeks after that conversation, something happened that neither of us saw coming, and it's the part of this story that actually raised the stakes on everything that came after. Lily's biological father called Claire out of nowhere. Not a text, an actual phone call, the first one in almost 2 years, and according to Claire, his voice sounded different, steadier, like he'd maybe gotten some things together in his life that he hadn't had together before. He told her he'd been in a program, that he'd been sober for 14 months, that he wanted to talk about seeing Lily again. Supervised, slowly, whatever Claire thought was appropriate. He said he understood if she didn't trust it yet. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, just a chance to try. Claire told me about the call that same night, sitting on my couch, visibly shaken in a way I hadn't seen from her before. "I don't know what to do with this," she said. "Part of me wants to believe people can actually change. Part of me has watched him promise change before and disappear within a month, every single time. And now there's a version of this where Lily gets her actual father back, and where do I even put you in that picture? I don't mean that unkindly. I don't know what any of this looks like anymore. I won't pretend that didn't scare me. For weeks, I'd been slowly, quietly becoming a fixture in Lily's life. And now, there was a real, specific possibility that the actual missing piece, her biological father, not a stand-in, not someone circling a box on a note, might re-enter the picture and make my place in all of this genuinely uncertain. I'd spent months worrying about my own capacity to disappear. I hadn't spent much time considering that I might simply become unnecessary instead. Claire agreed to one supervised visit, at a public park, with her present the entire time. She didn't ask me to come, and I didn't offer, because it felt like the wrong moment to insert myself into something that wasn't about me. She called me afterward. "It was strange," she said. "He was better than I expected, calmer. He brought her a gift, nothing extravagant, and he didn't push, and Lily was polite but distant the whole time. Cautious, in a way that broke my heart a little, because 6-year-olds shouldn't have to be cautious with their own fathers." Afterward, in the car, she asked me something I wasn't prepared for. What did she ask? She asked if he was going to be around like you're around. I didn't know what to say. I told her I honestly didn't know yet. Over the following weeks, there were 2 more supervised visits. Each one, according to Claire, went reasonably well on the surface. No incidents, no broken promises, nothing dramatic. But each time, Lily came home a little quieter than usual, processing something she didn't have the language for yet. And each time, when Claire asked her how it went, Lily's answers grew shorter, more guarded, until one evening she finally said the thing that, I think, ended up settling the entire question for all 3 of us, without anyone deciding it on purpose. "He's nice," she told her mother, "but he doesn't feel like anything yet. He's just a nice man I visit sometimes. It's not the same as home." Claire told me that quote almost word for word, and I've never forgotten it, because it was the moment I understood something important. Lily wasn't measuring the men in her life by biology. She was measuring them by consistency. By who actually showed up week after week without being asked to, without a supervised visit schedule attached to it. Her father was trying, genuinely, as far as anyone could tell. But trying, recently, after years of absence, doesn't erase the months and months of ordinary, unremarkable presence that had already accumulated in a laundromat regular's favor. The visits with her father continued, slower, at a pace Claire felt comfortable with, and I want to be clear, I never wanted him erased from the picture entirely, and neither did Claire. He was, and is, trying to build something real with his daughter, in his own time, and that mattered too. But it was around this exact period, with all of that uncertainty hanging in the air, unresolved, genuinely unresolved, that the note showed up on the kitchen table. Which is part of why it hit as hard as it did. It wasn't a question asked in a vacuum. It was a 6-year-old watching two men occupy two very different roles in her life at the exact same time, deciding, on her own, without any adult prompting her, which one she wanted to make official. The note came about 2 months after that conversation, on an entirely ordinary Wednesday, which is, I think, exactly how the most important moments usually arrive, with no warning, no ceremony, disguised as nothing at all. I'd picked Lily up from school because Claire had a dental board meeting running late. We were sitting at the kitchen table, Lily working on homework, me half watching a basketball game with the sound off, when she slid a piece of folded notebook paper across the table without a word and went back to her math worksheet like nothing had happened. I unfolded it. Kid handwriting, careful, clearly practiced more than once. You could see faint pencil marks underneath where she'd erased and rewritten letters to get them right. Will you be my dad? Circle yes or no. Below it, 2 boxes, drawn with a ruler, painstakingly even. I sat there for what felt like a very long time, though it was probably only seconds. Lily didn't look up from her worksheet. She was giving me the exact same casual, no-pressure posture Claire used when she'd asked me something important and didn't want to make it feel like a test. I realized, with a small jolt, that Lily had learned that from her mother. Ask the big thing, then look away, so the person doesn't feel cornered into answering before they're ready. Can I keep this for a little while? I asked, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. I want to think about it and give you a really good answer, not a rushed one. She shrugged, the specific, elaborate shrug of a 6-year-old trying to look unbothered. Okay, but not forever. That's annoying. I folded the note and put it in my jacket pocket, and I carried it there, unanswered, for 11 days. I want to explain what those 11 days actually were, because I was scared doesn't really cover it. Every single day, I took that note out and looked at it. Some days I got as far as picking up a pen. A few times I actually touched the pen to the yes box before pulling back. It wasn't that I didn't know the answer. Some part of me had known the answer the moment I unfolded that paper. What terrified me was the weight of circling it. Because once I did, it wasn't a private feeling anymore. It was a promise. A specific, documented, 6-year-old witnessed promise. And I had exactly one example in my entire life of what happens when a man makes that kind of promise and doesn't keep it. On day 3, before I called my mother, I actually drove to the park where Claire had told me the supervised visits with Lily's father were happening, though I never got out of the car. I just sat there for 20 minutes, watching from a distance, not because I doubted anything, but because some part of me needed to understand what I was actually weighing myself against. I watched a man who was, by every account, genuinely trying, sitting awkwardly on a bench with his own daughter, both of them working through something complicated and unspoken between them. I didn't feel triumphant watching that. I felt, mostly, a kind of sad solidarity. 2 men, in different ways, trying to figure out how to be worth a 6-year-old's trust. One of us starting from scratch, and one of us starting from months of accumulated ordinary presence that didn't feel like it should count for as much as it apparently did. I called my mother on day 6. I hadn't told her much about Claire, and I definitely hadn't told her about the note, but something made me need to hear her voice. "You sound like something's wrong," she said, the way mothers always know. I told her everything. The laundromat, Claire, Lily, the note sitting in my jacket pocket like it weighed 40 pounds. And then, finally, I told her the fear underneath all of it, that I might be capable of the same disappearing act my father had been capable of, and that circling yes on that piece of paper felt like handing a little girl a promise I might not be equipped to keep. My mother was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something about your father that I never told you? Because I didn't think you needed to carry it when you were younger?" "Okay. Your father didn't leave because he stopped loving you. He left because he was a coward who couldn't handle the weight of being needed. There's a difference between someone who's scared of that weight and runs from it, and someone who's scared of it and stays anyway. You've just described to me, in detail, 11 days of a grown man agonizing over a 6-year-old's note because he takes the promise inside it seriously enough to be terrified of breaking it. That fear you're describing, that's not what your father had. That's the opposite of what your father had. He never once, as far as I could tell, spent 11 days being afraid of hurting anyone. He just left, and didn't think about it again until guilt caught up with him, which it never really did. I didn't say anything for a long moment. You are already doing the thing he never did, she continued. You're taking it seriously before you've even said yes. That's not a flaw. That's the entire qualification. I hung up the phone that night and didn't circle anything yet. But something had shifted, not resolved. I want to be honest, it wasn't a clean, instant fix, but shifted. On day 9, Claire noticed the note was still uncircled, because I'd mentioned it to her the day Lily gave it to me, and she'd been giving me space, not pushing, the way she does most things. But that night she asked gently, "Do you need to talk about it? Not to pressure you. I just don't want you carrying something this heavy alone if you don't have to." I told her about the phone call with my mother. I told her I thought I knew the answer, but that knowing it and being brave enough to put it in writing, for a child who'd already had one man's promise break in her hands, were two different kinds of courage, and I was still working on the second one. "Can I tell you something Lily doesn't know I know?" Claire said. "She's asked me almost every day if you've answered yet. Not annoyed, just hopeful, in this quiet way. Like she's protecting the hope by not saying it too loud. She's 6, and she's already learned to brace for disappointment before it happens. I think that's the part that gets me the most. She's already learned that skill, this young, because of what happened before. That was the thing that finally moved me past the fear. Not the pressure of it. Claire never once pressured me. But the image of a 6-year-old quietly protecting her own hope, bracing herself the way kids shouldn't have to learn to brace, because the world had already taught her that adults don't always follow through. I decided, right then, that whatever fear I still had left, it didn't get to be bigger than her hope. On day 11, I picked Lily up from school again. Claire knew what was coming. I'd told her the night before, but she'd asked me to let this moment be just between Lily and me, and I understood exactly why. The drive home from school that day felt longer than usual, though the route hadn't changed. Lily talked the whole way, about a substitute teacher who'd let the class watch a movie, about a disagreement with the classmate named Dylan that had apparently escalated into a full diplomatic incident over crayons, and I answered on autopilot, half present, running the words I wanted to say to her over and over in my head, trying to find a version that felt big enough for what this actually meant, without turning it into something so heavy it would scare her. We sat at the same kitchen table. I took the folded note out of my jacket pocket, worn soft now at the creases from 11 days of being taken out and put back, and I set it down in front of her. "I thought about this for a long time," I said. "I wanted to make sure that when I answered, I meant it completely. Not just today, for a long time, because that's what this question actually deserves." She watched me, quiet, the same careful posture she'd used when she first handed it to me, bracing without seeming to brace. I picked up the pen and circled yes. I watched her read it, actually watched the exact moment the word registered, watched her face do something I don't think I'll ever fully be able to describe, some mixture of disbelief and relief and pure, unguarded joy, the kind of expression a kid has when something they hoped for so hard they were scared to hope for it out loud actually, finally, happens. "You circled yes," she said, like she needed to say it out loud to make it real. "I circled yes," I said. "And I need you to know something else. Because the circle by itself isn't enough. I'm going to keep showing up. Not because I have to. Because I want to. Every day. That's the actual promise. The circle's just the paperwork." She didn't say anything else. She just got up from her chair and hugged me. The specific full-body hug only kids give. Arms wrapped tight, no hesitation. And I sat there holding a 6-year-old who just handed me the most important document I'll probably ever sign in my life. And I understood, completely, for the first time, what my mother had meant on the phone. Fear that makes you careful isn't the same as fear that makes you leave. That was almost 3 years ago. Claire and I got married the following spring. Lily was the flower girl, and she also, at her own insistence, gave a brief and slightly chaotic speech during the reception about how she'd found me at the laundromat, which is not exactly the version of events, but not entirely wrong either. I remember standing at the front of that ceremony, watching Lily walk down the aisle, scattering flower petals with the same focused seriousness she brought to everything, and thinking about the 11 days, the note, the phone call with my mother, the 20 minutes I'd spent sitting in a parked car outside a playground watching another man try to earn back a place in his daughter's life. All of it had led to this exact moment, and none of it had felt inevitable while I was living through it. It had felt, at every stage, like something that could still fall apart, right up until it didn't. The note lives in a frame in our hallway now. Lily's handwriting, faint pencil marks still visible underneath where she erased and rewrote to get the letters right. The yes box circled in blue pen that started to fade slightly with time. She's 9 now, and periodically she'll walk past it and roll her eyes at how embarrassing 6-year-old her was, and I'll remind her that 6-year-old her asked one of the bravest questions I've ever heard, and that I think about it more than she probably realizes. I think about my own father sometimes still, less than I used to. I don't carry the same fear anymore that whatever made him capable of disappearing is dormant in me, waiting. I think I understand now that the fear itself was never the danger. The danger would have been ignoring it, or pretending it wasn't there, or letting it make the decision for me instead of just making me careful with the decision I eventually made anyway. Lily's biological father is still in her life, in a smaller, more measured way than either of us expected back then. The visits continued, slowly, and Claire and I never tried to push him out of the picture entirely. That never felt like the right thing to do, and honestly, watching him keep showing up, month after month, taught me something too. People can surprise you in both directions. Some men who should stay, leave. Some men who left, come back changed enough to actually mean it this time. I don't think there's a clean formula for knowing which is which in advance. I think you just watch what people actually do, over time, and let that tell you the truth instead of what they say in any single conversation. If there's one thing I've taken from all of this, it's that the bravest thing you can do with a promise that scares you isn't to make it instantly, without thought. It's to sit with the fear honestly, take it seriously, and circle yes anyway. Not because the fear disappeared, but because you decided, deliberately, that the person on the other side of that promise was worth being brave for. 11 days, 2 boxes on a piece of notebook paper, and somewhere in the space between them I became someone's father. Not because a form told me to, but because I finally understood that showing up scared is still showing up, and that's the only kind of promise that ever actually matters. If this one got you, tell me in the comments, and if you want more real stories like this, subscribe. There's a new one waiting for you every week.